Hey everyone, welcome to Podetize Weekly Client Coaching Call. Tracy and I have some really interesting stuff to share with you. It could get too techy, and we're going to try not to let it get too techy, but there's some significant changes that have happened recently in Apple in particular that you want to be aware of, and that's what we're going to talk about today. Yeah, I guess I need to switch speaker mode, don't I? There we go. Now I got it where it's
All
supposed to
right.
be. All right. Do you want to start or do you want me to start,
Sure,
Tracy?
I'll
So
start.
actually for everybody, so we're going to record our podcast as to talk about this subject. And for those of you here live in Zoom, we'll have Q&A after. All right. I'll leave it.
You ready?
Yeah, I'll leave it for you to take it away. Yep.
Hey, everyone. Welcome to Feed Your Brand. I'm Tracy Hazard, along with my co host and partner, Tom Hazard. And we are talking about podcast regulations. Oh, that sounds boring, Tom, but it's
Does.
really not. It's important because this is how the changes that they're making affect both your intellectual property rights, your access rights, the what's going to happen with the downloads. It could affect your earning rights. There's lots of changes over at Apple, and if we don't pay attention to them, we're going to sit back and look at our podcast statistics and go, what the heck happened?
Yeah, and it's interesting. Some of these changes have been in place since mid-October, early October 2023. And some shows, and I see a lot of shows. I monitor a lot of shows analytics, and some I haven't seen much of a drop off in downloads at all, and others I have. I think it depends a little bit on several factors. But we're here to talk about a few changes. That's one of them in terms of Apple Podcasts, which is still the dominant app people listen to podcasts on, and they really do drive the industry with any changes.
That's right. So let's talk about what some of these changes are. So some of you may have gotten notifications from Apple. Some of you don't manage your own accounts. You have podcast managers or editors or assistants who may have received them as well. And it forces you to log into Apple to accept the new terms and conditions. And it has made some also back end changes to some things in the way that the directory shares your podcast with others, with your listeners, with your subscribers, the way downloads are recorded from that standpoint. So some of those things are functional changes in terms of how it works for listening and downloads, and others are just straight changes that have to do with your relationship with Apple as a contributor to the podcast ecosystem.
So that's absolutely correct. Should we talk about some of the changes?
Yeah, let's talk about them.
All right. So let's talk about the one that everybody is going to be most concerned about who's listening to this episode or watching us live right now on social media, and that is the download impact, right? So if you've been podcasting for years, you've been used to how many downloads you get. And I'm going to share a little bit of what used to happen when somebody would subscribe to your show, whether they did it 6 months after it started, a year after it started, or several years after it started. What used to happen is once they subscribed, the app would download every single episode to their device, whether you listen to it or not. As a
That
subscriber,
was
you got,
early on. They made a change at some point which limited the number to 5 or 3. I think it depended on your personal settings.
well, there's still, even pretty recently, there are a lot of situations where the back catalog would download, but this change definitely changes that. It's in Even if you are a subscriber now of a show and then you don't listen to any episodes for a few weeks or a month or two, once you resume listening to the latest episode, it used to download those ones that you hadn't heard yet,
The
the
ones you
ones
missed,
you
yeah.
missed, right? And it's not doing that anymore. Now they're in the list. You'll see them in the list, but you have to actually actively press to play them for it to download it to your device. So it requires a little more user interaction. And here's the reason why Apple's doing this. They recognize that there's an awful lot of automatic downloads that used to happen from their app. And they can also tell who's been listening and who hasn't. And they realized, you know what, there's an awful lot of episodes that podcasters are getting downloads for that are never being listened to. And so this is Apple's way of trying to make the download numbers more in alignment with actual listenership. That's really the key thing they're trying to achieve. Now, it's flawed, right? I will tell you, there, even if are downloading it and you're actively pushing it to download it, that doesn't mean you have to listen to it right then. You might come back to it later. You may never listen to it. Now, Apple will know if you listen to it. And as a podcaster, you can log into Apple Podcast Connect and see the average percentage of each episode and how much it's been listened to. And, I've looked at this a lot, and there are some shows that get listened to 50% of the way through. Some, on average are 75, some are 90, 95. And I've actually seen some that are 120% listened through. And you might be thinking, how's that possible, Tom? I listened to the whole thing. How is it 120%? Well, because if I really enjoyed that episode and I got something out of it, and I want to go back and listen to a part of it and say, all right, now what was Tom saying when he was talking about this thing with Apple? And you go back and listen to part of it again, the app knows that. So that's how you actually can get more than 100% listenership, either on your entire show or in some episodes. But what they have done now is just made it so that if your listener behavior is such that you're not really listening to every episode or you have gaps, it's not going to automatically download them. So the good and the bad of that is, the bad is if you were strictly having sponsorship based on download numbers and now your downloads are going down, that's not going to be a great thing for you, right? Because your download numbers are less. However, if you're really wanting to know what your true listenership is, now that listenership is more in alignment with what you see in the download analytics. Does that make
And
sense,
so
Tracy?
I want to preface, I want to say this a little bit differently. And what you just said there is that, look, if you were depending on downloads, there's a reason why you've been getting these cheap junk rates for your advertising. And that is because advertisers know these download numbers were not real. And so they devalued podcast advertising. So now that needs to change, because now when I have a real download, I haven't actually somebody who downloaded. They may not have listened, right? There's still that, but they actively took an action to download it. So there's a much better indication of action taking than it is if I just had these automatic downloads happening. So now the industry needs to reset itself to be more accurate. And this is where Tom and I also have an issue. IAB has also announced a shift and difference in what they do. And IAB is the Interactive Advertising Bureau. I think I'm saying that right, or Interactive Advertising Bureau. I'm very sure. IAB. They control some of the major platforms register with them. We refuse to do it. That's a whole nother episode. I'm not going to go into that right now, but we refuse to be IAB compliant because we disagree on this one thing. And that is that when they're devaluing download numbers because they say these numbers aren't real. So this is how CPMs started in the industry. It's IAB and companies like that's fault, right? They decided that really out of 1,000 views of your banner ad way back when, one of them could be counted as real. That's what they decided. And so now they've decided that same thing quite some time ago, over 15 years ago, about podcast downloads as well. But now Apple's made this change. And now 1 out of every 1,000 is not accurate. Maybe it's 20 out of every 1,000 don't get actually listened to. They're just downloaded, but they're not listened to. We don't have the numbers on that yet. because this change has only happened in October, so it's relatively new. So we'll start seeing because if before I had 100 downloads and 80 of them were automatic, and they're gone now. I had 100 downloads that were calculating in my playthrough rate, and so they were at 0 in my playthrough rate. But now my playthrough rate should be more accurate because it's on the ones that were really downloaded. So my playthrough rates should rise. That's going to be our new metric, I believe, at some point here, but it's not available to us. It's not available and passed back to us podcasters. We have to go into Apple Connect, log in, look at it, find it. So it's not available to the advertisers. But I think that's going to have to be the new rate that we look at. Number of downloads and playthrough rate are going to be an indicator of real podcaster success. And when you have both, you should demand a lot more money than IAB is allowing you to have because they've already downgraded it.
Yeah, so there is a lot more data out there than Apple provides to all the podcast hosting companies, or, in a more efficient way to the podcaster. You have to sort of get information from here and there and kind of put it together. If you know your average playthrough rate on your episode is 90%, that's great. And then they have different kinds of playthrough rate, like all your episodes are listened to on a total percentage of X as well, right? And then each episode, some get listened to more than others, but there is an average total show playthrough rate. And if you look at that, let's say it's 90%, you can expect either that everybody who downloaded it listened to every episode and only 90% of it, or another way to look at that is 90% of your downloads actually listen to your episode, which is probably more likely.
Yes.
And, you can apply that playthrough rate from Apple and make a projection that all your downloads across all apps, about 90% of those are listened to. But that's really not what advertisers are looking at. I mean, they base paying for advertising based on, usually, well, there are different ways, lots of different ways. And I encourage everyone to find their own way to sell their sponsorships and not just jump on the CPM bandwagon. But
I really wish I could convince all of you podcasters out there to boycott that low cost advertising model. Stop enrolling with these platforms that promise you money and you don't even get $10 for your show. Just stop doing it, because if they had no inventory, they'd have to raise the rates. I really wish I could convince you out there. Run a general podcast advertising boycott and stop this ridiculousness of low cost.
And, I'll give you an example here of a recent customer came to Podetize from another platform, was in a programmatic ad program. They were making nothing. I mean, they really weren't getting paid anything, but they had opted into it. And when we migrated their show to Podetize, obviously you have to remove the ads, and we had done that. But there was a player out there somewhere that was still feeding their episodes from the old platform, and this show was let's just put it, a family friendly show that was on subject matter that young ears would be listening to potentially. And they were running ads for condoms on this show. I couldn't believe it. And they're like, how's that happening? And it was really weird. Anyway, we figured out how it was happening and helped them shut off that program so that wasn't happening. But anyway, the point is, you don't get control in these programmatic ad systems what kinds of ads are run on your show. They're going to run whatever they want, and they're paying very little for it because it is random shotgun approach of advertising, which is not all advertising in podcasting. It's just some systems, but you're going to get paid based on, for every 1,000 downloads, you're going to get paid a certain amount of money. That's how that works. And
right. So we're hoping,
fans,
and we have no actual data on this, but we're hoping that this move on Apple's side is an indication that there may be advertising coming from the Apple platform. There may be more statistics pass through coming because they're trying to be more advertiser friendly and more accurate. However, my flip side of that is, again, remember that this is supposed to be a two-way platform. You're the content creator they didn't have your content, they wouldn't get people to sit around and use their phones for hours on end listening to podcasts, right? It's a user grab for them, right? And a number of hours on the phone. And it's part of what they want is to create this stickiness for their devices. So it's a two-way. They win by having content, and you get to have your content distributed. However, when they've now done this and removed the automatic downloads, it means out of sight, out of mind for some people that may have just forgotten, and then they would have remembered and they would have seen it and they'd be like, oh, I got to catch up on that show. So now you have no ability to connect back with those listeners. You never had it, but they should provide that. And that's the big issue that I have with this change that they've created, is that they've taken something away from you podcasters in terms of at least some number that was getting you a little bit more in the programmatic advertising dollars. They took that away from you, and then they still give you no way to send a message to your subscribers who haven't been downloading. You don't have a way to push to them to say, hey, I'm here, except to create another episode that they won't get downloaded. So that's it's an unfair relationship. It's imbalanced.
Okay,
They
don't
are
get
going to
Tracy
need to fix it.
started here, really,
Yeah,
because I
I
know
told you
this
I
is
ranted.
a serious pet peeve of yours. And honestly, I think every podcaster would like to be able to communicate with their subscribers, with their followers on Spotify, even if it was through the listening app that they're subscribed to, just so everybody understands, each of those apps has their own users who've signed up. Like in Apple, you have to sign up with an Apple ID before you can listen to podcasts. And on Spotify, you can listen for free but hear ads. But if you're you want to follow someone and you want to have that information stored, you've got to have a Spotify account and sign into it. So they actually know, to push it to you, to let you know, hey, there's a new episode out. But that information, as who those people are, belongs to that app or the company that owns that app and provides that app. That's their intellectual property, and they don't share it with podcasters. Never have, and I'm sure never will. So you need to accept that. I talk to new podcasters all the time. Like, who are my subscribers? Well, how many of them are men and how many are women? And all this sort of stuff. They want demographic information. What are their ages? Well, we don't get that because the apps don't share it with us podcasters. That's one of the realities of the podcast ecosystem. But there's still a lot of value that we're getting putting our podcasts out on all these apps. We're distributing it widely. Every time we publish a new one, it does push to the apps. It is in the the lineup of your shows, the listing. There's a new episode today. And if you're subscribed, I mean, Apple still tells me, hey, a new episode of Feed Your Brand is live today on, is available on Apple or whatever app it does. Other apps do this too. But gosh, it would be nice if all these different apps, especially the big ones, made it so that we could communicate, even just an announcement here and there that would
Like our new
push.
season is dropping,
Yep.
or you won't believe the guests that I've got on next episode, right? Make sure you're paying attention to your notifications, right? There's no way for us to do that, and that is making a relationship imbalanced. And that's what we really want to point out today with this podcast regulations. If you're not paying attention when they pass through terms and conditions, when they pass through these changes to you, it's creating much more imbalance as we go forward. And it's significant. So another change that came forward is they made you accept the terms and conditions, and they have now offered captioning, right?
Yeah.
And so you have to go in and you have to turn it off if you don't want it. And
I
that,
didn't read that. Can you actually turn it off, Tracy? I
well,
thought it was
you
just a
you don't have
matter of
you don't have an ability to turn it off, but you can provide your own.
right.
Like,
Okay, so
yeah,
let's lay this out for people. I mean, any of you who have ever watched a YouTube video are probably familiar. When you watch a YouTube video, especially if your sound is off, you see captions on the YouTube video, and even sometimes if the sound is on, it depends what you're doing. But
So I
There
want
are
to be clear with
captions.
everyone. That is user controlled too, though.
Mhm.
If you have that set as turned off as a user, as a viewer of YouTube videos or a listener, I don't actually know about that because it's a new feature. So I don't know if you can, as a listener, turn them off. On the Apple app side, I don't have an Apple app,
I
so
think
I can't.
I think it is a choice. But
Yeah.
let's stick with YouTube for a
So,
moment.
but
YouTube auto generates a transcript and puts captions on YouTube videos, but you can also on YouTube, when you upload your video, upload a file that has a corrected transcript. And I'll tell you, the ones that are auto generated, the more technical, or unique industry terms and things that are spoken in your episode, the worse the auto generated transcript is going to be. It often gets things wrong. It never spells potatize correctly when we say potatize in a video. So this is very similar what Apple is doing. Now, podcasts have always been a listening medium, not a viewing medium, but what they say they're doing it for is actually for how do you say, more for accessibility compliance, like hearing impaired and such people. That so Apple will automatically, and you have to agree to the terms and conditions, will automatically transcribe your episodes in their system, and people can choose to view the equivalent of follow the bouncing ball with the transcript, which really, it's, I think, just making the text sort of lighter and bolder as it goes. But you follow it through if you want to. They're doing that, and they'll auto generate it whether you want them to or not. Even, they say, on your back catalog
no,
eventually.
actually, Tom,
That's what they said.
the
Mm.
terms and conditions say, but I haven't found the button yet. I've only found a place where you can upload it. Haven't found the place where you opt out. But the actual Apple Podcast Connect terms and conditions that you all had to just accept in order to use your Connect account, it says you grant Apple the right to create transcripts of your content and to display such transcripts on Apple Podcasts, provided that Apple shall provide you with the ability within Podcast Connect or by other digital means, so maybe you have to send an email, to opt out of the public display of such transcripts on Apple Podcast, except where the display of such transcripts is required by applicable law, which is in some countries. And then
Okay.
here's the second part of it that I'm not happy with. You grant Apple a non-exclusive worldwide and royalty-free license to use your content for internal research and development to improve Apple's products and services. That is saying AI without saying AI.
That they get to use it for whatever they want
For
for their
artificial
purposes.
intelligence
Yeah.
research. That means a training data set. That means they're using your content really without you knowing exactly how it's being used. And you've agreed to it.
Well,
In
and
order to
unfortunately,
have your podcast distributed, right?
right, to be on Apple, you're going to have to agree.
Right.
Right.
And so you need to understand that these things are happening. So I'm a really not a fan at all of automatic transcripts. I mean, my last name's Hazard with two Z's. It is never spelled properly. Our company Poetitize comes out Poetitize every time. Like, they can't spell it. It's always wrong. So your brand is damaged by automatic transcripts. Your messaging, if you are in industry, I've used this example a lot. If you're in the e-commerce industry and on air you say SKU, they will spell it SKEW, not SKU, stock keeping units. So it's completely misinterpreted. And so that, if someone's actually reading that and not listening, they're not getting the understanding, and it reflects badly on you. They don't understand that that's Apple's automatic transcript problem or YouTube's automatic transcript problem. They think you provided that and that you can't spell, that you don't even know your own industry terms, right? They don't understand. The user, listener, viewer doesn't understand and connect that to the app. They connect that to you. And so this is where I am not happy with. I understand that there's these regulations and there are some countries in the world that are requiring that, but we must have a better way to do this. And better way to have control, better way to review what's going on there. Apple Podcasts, Apple Connect does not have a way to edit that.
No, actually, they do.
You have to upload it.
You can download their version after they've done it. You can adjust it and put it back up, which they would love it if you did. But there also is a way to upload from the get-go before you even publish an episode with a edited transcript
But it
that
doesn't
will
match
publish with it.
timestamps. When you do that, you mess up the timing. And so you cannot be guaranteed. It's not like in video, they have something called an SRT file, and the SRT file has the timings put into it so that it actually runs when the words are being said. But that doesn't work in the audio version. When you download it and you re-upload it, it changes its formatting because the system changes, it converts it, and it doesn't always match up.
I think they're trying to, and there are chapter markings and other things you can do, but it remains to be seen how
Right.
easy this is going to be. But it can be done is the point, but it's a lot more work for the podcaster. The typical podcaster who really is recording their content, uploading it and publishing it in real time or very quickly, like within the same day. And we have some podcasters doing that on Podetize. They're not really editing their stuff. They don't have time to get a transcript that's ready and make sure and correct it, make sure it's right before they upload it and publish that episode on the same day or the next day. They're gonna be stuck probably with Apple doing it on their own.
Yes, absolutely. Because at least you can say it wasn't me. Like, right? At least you can say it wasn't me because you don't have the time to go through it that thoroughly. And for lower downloads, lower ad dollars, do you really want to spend the time? They haven't incentivized us to either. So they're reducing the quality overall of experience. And I don't think this is in your favor. And we really do need to pay attention that their compliance with regulations. The other regulation we've talked about ad nauseum is obviously the email change where they allow the blocking and privacy of emails. We definitely don't comply with that. Make sure your email is being shown or your listeners can't reach out to you at all. And you've just made it so much easier for them to keep your subscribers from you. So stop doing that one too. So there's a lot of these regulations that are not actually going to make the subscriber and listener experience better. And you need to make sure you understand that that's what you're agreeing to when you just randomly say, I got to have my stuff on Apple, so I got to agree to their terms and conditions. I'm stuck. And then keep out and watch, because I guarantee you there's going to be some artificial intelligence, big like surprise as to what Apple's doing with your data. There's a reason they're transcribing everything and agreeing to transcribe it. They're going to be using it for an artificial intelligence large language model. And they've not offered to pay you.
That is a murky issue that kind of like the digital rights management of images that's going through
Right.
a huge shift in that
Right.
business right now.
Yeah. And you've just, by agreeing to that, you agreed to allow it for research purposes. But that research purposes become a base of knowledge. And it's really hard and very murky to separate the two from whatever their eventual output and the benefits that they're achieving off the backs of your information. So keep that in mind. You've waived your right already to it.
I'm glad you're saying it's for research purposes only, because that implies they're not allowed to directly profit off of it. It implies it.
That implies that, but they are profiting off of it. So let's say they build an amazing large language model that does conversations better than anyone else because they use real language pattern, because you all do it. You're great speakers, right? Way better than just taking Reddit information and then regurgitating that into that's what conversation should sound like. That's not how humans speak. That's how people type, right? So it's not really accurate as to it. So it could be an even better conversational AI than anyone out there because they're using our data. But they're going to get paid a lot of money off of that because their AI is better, but we didn't get paid a dime in the process for training that, for being the research basis of that.
Yeah, that's problematic.
It's really problematic. Now, I do not know that for a fact. Everyone out there listening, this is just how I understand how AI LLMs are created, large language models. And I understand the training data sets and the research side of things. And this is how it happens.
It's a slippery slope.
It's a slippery slope is really what I'm saying. Yes, exactly, Tom. So these are why we wanted to bring these up to you. But here's the thing that we know. If you want to make sure that your subscribers, your listeners, your community, everything that you do is being nurtured to its maximum so that they will download your episodes, play through, do these things. The number one thing you can do is be absolutely consistent and constant. Everything in this system is geared against you. This is why Tom and I are against seasonal shows. They're harder. This is why you can't take more than 3 weeks off. Make sure you don't take 3 weeks off. Make sure you drop an episode once a month. That's what we recommend to you in between seasons, if that's what you want to do. Because all of these algorithms are geared to making sure that you are no longer found. And so you can be a contributing factor in making this more harmful to your show, not just the regulations. So that's what we really want to leave you with today. Like this idea that, yeah, these things are happening and they are kind of happening to you here, but that doesn't mean that you're without power. Your ability to be consistent with your audience is the number one thing you can control. And consistency is the most rewarded things because listeners are out there looking for podcasts and they don't want fly by night podcasts who show up now and again. The ones that show up consistently are the ones they're going to listen to consistently. And there are a lot of listeners out there looking for content.
And really, to that end, Tracy, creating valuable content that your listeners are going to want to come back to and hear over and over again. They like you. They want to keep hearing from you. They're going to find you. And if you make yourself available to be found and to be communicated with, even with a unique email for the podcast, if that's what it is, or over through LinkedIn or whatever, however you want to be communicated, incentivize those listeners to get off that listening app and engage with you elsewhere so you know who they are and you benefit. You know, there are ways to do this. We talk about it all the time here on Podetize. We're here to support you not only with making sure you're aware of the murky waters of digital rights and all these sorts of things, your copyrighted material, your podcast episodes and all that. And we're keeping an eye out for you, and we're gonna keep coming back and sharing our thoughts with you on it. But aside from that, there are many things you can do to engage your listeners outside of that app, provide them more value, and they will seek you out.
That's right. I mean, look, I don't really want downloads. I don't want the automatic downloads. I want to really know who's listening to my show because I'm out here talking to you. It is worthless to me to share this advice and share this information with a download. I want to share it with a human who can do something about it. So we're actually doing a little study on our end because we offer these coaching calls every single week for our community in Podetize, and we live stream them out to on social media and in YouTube as well. So we want to see if you're listening and taking action, is your show growing faster than those that don't show up to our calls? So we're doing an internal study from our client base that says these people showed up, the A people showed up and they took actions, and the B people didn't show up. Is there a growth difference in shows that are at the same stage, startup stage, 25 episodes, 100 episodes? And we're taking a look at that. And I can't wait to share that information and some of the case studies about what growth has happened, because this is the one thing Tom and I know. Those that take action are few and far between, and they are 10 to 100 times more successful than their counterparts who never take action, who listen but don't do anything, or who don't listen at all and just say, I don't need to know.
I love what we do, Tracy. That's why I get charged and I keep coming back, showing up for all of you. I love it. And yeah, we're all about the numbers and measuring results. So
that's right. Well, thanks everyone for listening. We appreciate you. And we'll be back here next week with another episode and another coaching topic for those of you in the podcast industry. Go.
There.
Yep. Everyone, thank you.
Thanks everyone out there live. We're going to disconnect the live stream. If you were here on Zoom, you could ask us some questions. We can keep the conversation going right now. So learn how to do that at podetize.com. Thanks everyone.
No, learn how to do that at podcastersunited.org.
Well, there's a couple ways. It's true though, because it depends how you come into us. You can learn it from Podetize as well. But the blog post for this episode will be at podcastersunited.org for sure. Okay.